a effective director translates context so the audience understands, right? They understand what the leadership, the C-level and vice president are trying to achieve. They put it in appropriately contextual language that the managers and associates follow.
Welcome to ReedFlections, a podcast on life, leadership, and learning. I'm Art Calderon, here with Reed Nyffeler. Reed is a CEO of a growing global franchising company. Additionally, a husband and a father, a seasoned podcaster, and a published author. We have been talking so far in Season 2 about developing authentic and intentional leaders. Why develop leaders? Who you should develop? What capacities do leaders need? And currently, where in the organizations can leaders grow? We talked about the associate level, manager level, director level, vice president, and C-suites coming up. Currently, we are talking about the director level, kind of right in the middle there, that sweet spot. In your opinion, what is the big difference in the responsibilities between a manager and a director?
Yeah, and a director, that's really your hinge point. If we look at it kind of like a teeter-totter, they're right there at that apex, right? And so, it's somewhat of an organizational translator. I remember when I was in Hungary and I spoke to an Hungarian audience on franchising. And as you know, I'm really funny. And so I was sitting there thinking,
Now that's funny.
as I was sitting there, I thought, I got some good ones. They're really going to have this group roaring. We're in this,
Very bold of you. Go on.
Yeah. So I thought I'm going to get them rolling. And, obviously they'll get the ab workout they're expecting, et cetera. So, right before me was this guy that was a water polo multi-champion. And I'm thinking, they do laugh because they're thinking he's pretty funny.
Okay.
And I'm listening to the translator, and the guy announced him. He's like, yeah, you may think I'm the water polo guy, but I'm not. And this guy was, he didn't have the athletic build the other guy had. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And so that's pretty lowbrow humor.
Yeah.
I'm going to come in with some pretty elevated humor. And so then I come in and I'm giving my lines, and then, I'm like, why isn't the audience laughing? And so I throw something after. I said, this must be lost in translation. That was really funny.
Yeah, it was a translator's problem.
It was a translator's problem, right? It was clearly because I was funny. So then a couple of years later, I went to Japan, and I was there with an ambassador and kind of an appointee that was there. And then we had a translator, and they require a translator. And the person I was traveling with spoke fluent Japanese, and she knew what they were saying, and she would correct the translator, because what I didn't realize until that moment was the translator has to translate verbatim what you're saying, not context of what you're saying. And this is really that hinge point of a director. The director needs to, a effective director translates context so the audience understands, right? They understand what the leadership, the C-level and vice president are trying to achieve. They put it in appropriately contextual language that the managers and associates follow. And so that's really the difference of that role, is you're able to understand the vision and the purpose of the organization, and then understand the strategic plan that typically is coming from a vice president to then translate that into actionable tactical items that the manager and associates are managing. And really what you're focused on is that monthly, right? An associate is focused on the daily and hourly, as we discussed a couple of episodes ago, whereas now the manager is focused on the weekly and daily, and then looking forward to the monthly. The director is focused on that monthly and quarterly, and how does that translate down to the weekly? And so that's that translation component that is an effective director.
So as you move up in a leadership role, you need to have a longer line of sight, so to speak. You need to be able to hear what the leader is saying, understand what the leader is saying, and know how to communicate that to a way that is going to be applicable to the people that you lead, right? So it may not be specifically verbatim. You don't just take that words and turn around and say exactly the same words, but you're able to translate that into something, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. So what makes a successful director? How are they able to do that? What qualities do they have where they can take that high-level directive from their leadership and translate it into something that is applicable for the people they lead?
A teacher takes the simple and makes it complex, and a leader takes the complex and makes it simple. And so I think an effective person is saying, wow, we have a lot of goals and objectives. So let's distill this down as a director to say, what do we really need to do next, right? We simplify the information and say, here's, if we do this sequentially and we walk our way down this, we distill it down procedurally, we'll be able to achieve our goal and objective. Because it can be highly overwhelming, right? And, as I've worked with directors, and let's use an analogy of a closet, there's some people that like used to having everything in that room, then starting to organize the closet. Right? As a director, you're in that middle point. So there's going to be new information coming from C-level and vice president level parts of the organization. Then you still have to continue to maintain the managers and associates that are organizing the closet. And so what you're really doing is partitioning or sectioning off the closet in that analogy. So you're saying any new pair of pants is going to be hung over here. Any new shirt is going to go over here, and any new, bag is going to be put on this particular shelf. And so that is where then they're not waiting for all the bags to be in the room or all the pants to be in the room or all the shirts to be in the room, because it's never going to happen.
Right. There's always something coming in.
That's right. And so as a director, what you're doing is you're partitioning that and recognizing when it comes in this way. And think of that like organizing a retail store, right? They're constantly getting new things that are coming in. That's the director, and largely that's a role that you're taking in a retail store. You're the store director, and you know where that all goes. And occasionally you need to reset the displays, and occasionally you need to be there. And so that's what they need to understand, is they're always in the middle, and there's going to be things flowing through. They just need to direct it to the right location of that particular business or role they're in, so that it's effective and there's a flow, so that it doesn't stop at the director level.
So given that, what is a daily peek into the day of a director look like when they're having all of this stuff continually come in from the C-suite, new things from the VPs, and they're got these continual interactions with the managers and maybe the associates as well? What does that look like day to day?
Yeah, so I would say first it's prioritize, second would be organize, and then third would be assign. So first we need to say, okay, in order to accomplish the goals and objectives that the C-level or VP are having coming in, what is the priority, right? And then, meaning that if we're going to do that, what is the biggest allocation of time that we should apply, ultimately to do that, right? So, and then the second is organize. How would I organize this in a way that it be done efficiently, right, and systematically? And then we assign that role to the managers and or associates that they report to and say, okay, for example, let's say, we're at a donut shop, right? And the objective as the director is say, we want to make sure that it's a Saturday morning, we have enough donuts for everyone. So then we prioritize and say, you're going to be cooking them, you're going to be stocking the shelves, and you're going to be meeting with the customers, right? And then we organize, we say, okay, we got to wake up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. to make sure that the donuts are otherwise made and put on the shelves. And then the next group is going to come in as hey, our first customers will come in at 6 or 6:30 or 7. So you need to be ready to serve those customers. And then ultimately we manage the volume accordingly. And then we assign those roles and responsibilities, and the customers come in as a nice flow. Versus a director that says, hey, we got a whole bunch of donuts we got to deliver. Just find something and do it yourself, right? You're not going to prioritize what needs to be done in what order. The donuts are made after the customers come, right? You're not going to organize in a way that's easy to grab them for high volume, right? They've got their different trays and they're otherwise organized. And then you're not going to assign, hey, it's your job to meet that one particular customer. And so if we really look at that, that's a good example of something that we might have experienced that otherwise it's super organized and efficient. Even though there's a high volume of customers, we can get people through. And that's because of an effective director. And as I go to retail restaurants and those types of things, I can see that the director level is where the challenges sometimes are, because they don't, the group doesn't know what to do, and they haven't prioritized, they haven't organized, and they haven't assigned.
Yeah. So back to that donut analogy. Isn't there a temptation for most directors to say, you know what, you're not stacking those donuts properly. Get out of the way. Let me do it. I can do the task better than you can. What do you say to a director who's tempted to jump in there and do the mundane or the simple tasks to the exclusion of some of the other things they should be doing?
Yeah, and I think what we want to do as a director is define the parameters and then give them the ability to have autonomy to perform within the parameters. And so to your donut analogy, someone comes in, how many donuts would you like? That's one of the first questions you get. A dozen. So then I leave it up to that associate or manager to decide what 12 donuts are going to go in that box and do they pay for it. That's all I'm asking. So whether they stack them one direction or another, if it's a long john, it's got to lay flat, or if it's got to be stacked up vertically, that's up to them, right? They're determining that.
You can't get caught up in those weeds.
Nope, you can't get caught up in those weeds. And then ultimately let the customer select. And so ultimately, if they stay, everything fits within the box, they sell them the donuts and they pay for it. That's the director's role, to make sure that every customer is there and do so efficiently. How they achieve that, what they say or how they ask a question, that's a little bit of micromanagement, right? And that's where you see that, following that same analogy, you see kind of the difference of the two.
And isn't it always true that if you're a good director, you can often see that maybe I can do that better, but it's not just about that particular task being done better by me, but empowering the people who are doing it.
Yeah, and so micromanagement bogs down productivity. A director's job is to accelerate productivity. So we want to look at the things that accelerate productivity. And so, of course, we can, generally speaking, do that job better, right? But not always. I would say that when do we want to reassign a task and when do we want to keep a task? Because there are times we need to keep a task. And I would say when the subordinate can do it at 80% of the abilities of which we can achieve that objective, we need to assign that. Because what we want to do is manage that for the sake of consistency. And so, however, I was told the less frequent it is, the more likely it's your role as a director, right? So if it's monthly, quarterly, annually, right? So setting goals for the department is the director's responsibility. It doesn't happen every day.
Yeah.
Achieving the goals happen every day, but setting the goals do not. And if it's allocation of resources that are there, that doesn't happen every day. That's saying, hey, I need a new person over here. I've got a new shipment that came in. That's the director's role. And any material change management, that's the director's role. New employee being onboarded, new task that needs to be assigned, that's really the director's role. So anything that's highly repetitive should be the associate's role. Things that are more frequent should be the manager's role. And things that happen less frequently or are new, I would say new to you. That's just a reminder to me. New.
Right.
All right, Reed, where's this going to go? Who's going to handle it? It's new to me. So it's going to be new to the organization. So I need to make sure I otherwise direct that to the right department or individual to achieve the objective at hand.
So what else makes that director role unique? I've seen you present to some of our key leadership at different franchises, and you show them a progression that a guard, in our case, can move up should they want to. They can move up, and they get to from this management level up to a director level, and there's a gap there oftentimes because there's some unique differences and responsibilities for that director role. What are some of those things?
Yeah, I think some of it is, when you're in a manager role, your area's relatively speaking defined, right? And so if you look at just general management responsibilities we see kind of across the board, you go to a restaurant, which I presume we've all been to, you have your front of house manager, right? And so that's all defined. You have, every customer that comes in, and you have all the tables that are otherwise there and the menus that are there predefined. Then you have your back of house manager. They're only any order that comes in from the leader is then they're producing the food in an appropriate amount of time to have it delivered. But then you become the store director. Now you may be dealing with a customer on one moment, and the very next minute you're setting a plate together that's going to be delivered to that customer, or you're short, the hamburger buns if that's the case, or whatever the challenges otherwise might be. So the challenge for that director is super dynamic. There's limited consistency and certainly not a lot of things, and many people can get overwhelmed there. So they want that role, but then there's too many things flying two different directions, which creates a high turnover. Because at an associate level, you've gotten to the role of manager typically because you're really proficient at your job. You understand every aspect of it all, right? So I'll give another analogy. And a lot of small business owners, they go from a associate to a manager to a director, right? And that director is that ownership position. And so let's use a plumber, for example. As an associate and you're learning the plumbing business, you really understand how to do that. Then you can manage a project, right? So you might have 2 or 3 plumbers here and you're telling them to go put their pipes in. You're like, I can be an owner, right? I can step into that director role. And then what happens is they step into that role. Now they got to manage finances. Now they have to get new jobs. Now they have to do all these other things as a director, and they begin to fail. But they're like, wait a minute, I was one of the best plumbers and I could manage a crew really, really well. But what I've done is I've expanded that portfolio of responsibilities, and I'm getting outside of the things I was really good at and doing things I've never done before. And I begin to fail, get overwhelmed, and ultimately discouraged. And that's because we took that manager role where we could manage teams to do the task. And then now as a director, we have to take on other responsibilities, budgets and recruiting clients and all these other things that we're not skilled at, that aren't translatable skills from the previous job. And that is why people get overwhelmed in that director role, is because now it's not things that you've been trained to do in a college environment or that you have proficiency in. It's things that are challenging you outside of that at that kind of apex.
It's a big responsibility for the person who selects someone to go from manager to director to support them, right? Otherwise, you will see that turnover. They're overwhelmed. You don't want to just say, okay, you're a director now. You should be able to do everything, especially the things that I don't want to do anymore, right?
Right. And I think I'll use another sports analogy because, certainly they're just things we can gravitate towards. That's why catchers in the baseball typically make the best managers, because they can see the whole field, right? And ultimately, they're sitting there. They know the pitch they're calling. is going to likely either be a ground ball or a fly ball, right? And they're maybe even setting the defenses associated with what pitch they're going to call. And then ultimately they're watching how the fielders are reacting, right? They are essentially the director on the field. And they understand their role as a catcher, but they also understand, the strengths of their defense and the batter's proficiencies to then make the appropriate call for the pitch that's coming in. And that's what a director does, right? They're not the vice president or the team manager that's putting resources in or out, but they know what's on the field needs to be done. And so that's an example of a director. Whereas the shortstop's just focused on if a ball comes to them, they take care of it. Or, maybe understanding whether the guy on first base is going to run to second base or not, or try and steal a base. So that's really the catcher is the director in that analogy. Again, seeing the whole field and recognizing what's to come, and then appropriately trying to set the team up for the greatest success.
All right, so let's say we got a manager. He's been managing, he or she's been managing, been doing presumably a good job, and they're ready to move to that next level. They believe they want to. They see an opportunity to move into a director role. What advice did you have for someone like that?
So I think the mistake people make is what they want to do is what they're focused on, not why they want to do it.
Okay.
So I think if you want to be a director, ask why do you want to be a director, right? And if that answer is because I want the title, in our case, I want an office, I want autonomy, I want a big budget, I want people to tell what to do. No, why you want to do is I want to serve more people. I want to develop more people. That's the right answer. If you feel like you can multiply the impact of someone because you care about them and you want to serve them and servant-hearted leadership, then you're ready to be a director. But if you're doing it for, self beneficial reasons, that's the wrong reason to do it. You should be wanting to serve more people because ultimately, as you elevate in the organization, it's more and more thankless, right? So ultimately, responsibility. They don't say, hey, they won because the coach was a great coach. Yeah. They say they lost because the coach had made a mistake, right? I mean, the players had great plays, right? Your associate level, but the coach is there. And so the higher you get up in the organization, the more complaints and concerns you're going to be receiving, and the more blame you're going to be receiving as a result. And in some cases, rightfully so. You made the decisions, right? You made the decision to hire those people, call that player, whatever the case might be. And there's a lot of responsibility and pressure there. And so the other reason to do it is because, don't become a director if you are a people pleaser. Because the higher you get to an organization, the less people you're going to please, right? Because ultimately you have objectives to achieve. And so if you appreciate achieving the objective, then that's the way to focus on being a director.
So basically, if you're going to be in the director role, if you desire that, you need to give more praise than you're seeking it. If you're seeking for more praise, it's really the opposite.
Absolutely. I mean, we as directors, the most effective managers, if we look back and directors we have, are the ones that are always giving recognition to the front lines and the praise. I mean, those are the people we listen to, those are the people we identify with, and the ones we want to follow ultimately. And conversely, if we're someone that needs high affirmation, right, don't be a director, right? Just don't do it. And if you are someone that just hangs on every word, everybody talks about you, and you're just chasing down praise and and inspiration from that, and the general public, absolutely don't step into that role because
be a podcaster instead.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, then you get tons of praise as a result. Yeah, exactly. So I think if we really need that affirmation, it's the wrong role in that director role. Right. Really, we should get for me, part of the things that I get affirmation from is productivity, right? I want to see people make progress, other people, right? That's why I think, I've elevated my leadership role. I look back and I see an impact that I can have, and whether it's a franchise owner, right? Want them to take the ball and run with it, right? Is, hey, I'm going to create the field, I'm going to give you the ball, and then you do your best to make it, get the life that you want from there. And that's really what you want to be as a director, somebody that you can say, hey, I am going to give you the resources and the training, and you run with it, and I'm going to be the one clapping and encouraging you and offering you praise and adoration for it.
Great. Directors, an important part of any organization. Thank you very much, Reed, for sharing with us your insights. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in and listening to ReedFlections. Next time, we're going to talk about the next level up VP, Vice President role, and the importance of a Vice President in a traditional organization. In the meantime, I am Art Calderon. Stay purposeful.
If you are a director or aspire to be a director, you are essentially a translator. You're translating the vision and purpose of an organization into tactical, practical, day-to-day application. And that's a thankless job. So if you're focused on really trying to get affirmation and encouragement, think of how can I reflect that? Every time you feel like you need affirmation or encouragement, give that to your team. And you will be a much more dramatic and effective director than any other thing that you can do is giving affirmation and appreciation for those that are following the tasks that you've assigned as you translate the goals and objectives of the organization. We look forward to seeing you next week as we study what it means to be a vice president.